Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. The title is a sentence that popped into my mind, and it was in some sense a way of seeing something I hadn't considered before. What I would like to focus for this talk, and the title is The Religious Live in the Imagination of God. And so we cannot avoid that we are creatures with mental faculties, which in some sense means we're in a mentally infused experience of life. And it's as if you look at the you read a book and you see the color in the book, but then you realize the meaning of the words is behind your eyes in some sense originating. When we wonder about where intelligence is arising from, we cannot ignore the body, but we also cannot ignore outside of the body. And so man has always sought greater relationships, and the greatest relationship it could create was in a sense, God's self. And so what I mean by that is that just a second, guys. I usually listen to music as I get these thoughts. Okay. Excuse the interruption. Um, where I was going with this was that there, every human being looks at history and realizes they're able to color it as far as their effort to comprehend it has gone, and also as far as the technologies allow. I realized very early on in this life that there are fundamentally two ways I could function as a creature. One of them oriented me towards a conceptual framework of reality. The other oriented me towards an experiential uh, journey of reality. And what I mean by that is these two are simultaneous, but in some sense, in my mind, I was making a decision as if, like, do I want to believe I am a thought? Or do I want to uh, refresh the browser of the unknown cosmos? Do you know what I mean? So for me, it became a sense of noticing a difference between my thoughts on the world and the world, because it's very unique. It's as if there are levels of thought, or we can say dimensions of thought within the mind, and the mind is the bridge between what I consider to be visible and invisible intelligence, or known or unknown intelligence, or conscious mind, unconscious, whatever, you know, floats your boat. But what I'm saying is that the notion is simply that there is a static thought of you, then there is a thought of you having thoughts. And so that part where it's like the thought of you, and so what I mean by this is that it's as if, like, the child opens its eyes, and by being called its name, and by as time goes on, localizing and individualizing its attention, it eventually declares itself as an individual. I was listening to a lecture by Dr. Jordan Peterson, and this man is very wise. You know, his framework, he's looking at the top of the mountain from a part of the mountain I can't fully comprehend yet. But in my own sense, I consider that the thought, or let me say it like this: the ego is a mask. It is a subjective mask over objective reality. It's an intelligent subjective mask, as if this is your self we're talking about, but this self is not just based on the ideas you have on it. It's not just based on the biology. It's also based on how the intelligence of the whole environment functions. And so there comes the approach of man's mind, where it's very fascinating. It's as if history is a sine wave, or like this curve that constantly goes up and down. And the reason is because history is an intelligent wave, as if from let us be playful in science fiction, uh, through a science fiction lens. Um, let us say that if there was a very advanced Andromedan species, I'm being playful here, don't take these things seriously, but but I'm saying, like, let's say there was an advanced, enlightened Andromedan, extraterrestrial civilization, as we would consider. And then they, in some sense, realized that instead of trying to populate the planet, I've talked to some, very high grade conspiracy theorists. These kids gatherings. I've been in like parties and stuff, and it shocks me in the sense that some people believe that there's a part of the evolutionary chart, and this is not an idea that one can easily refuse because it is so long ago. Who knows? When we look at all the other animals on this planet, the human being has been able to create things no other creature has. So it seems as if, like, this ape had fingers and some intelligence chose it, and as it chose it, it imbued it with an intelligent evolving thing. But for me, this is what I'm saying: that imagine that advanced, enlightened Andromedan civilization was like, instead of going one by one to different planets and trying to continue our intelligence forward, it's as if they're sending a wave to the solar system for all the planets to, in some sense, receive intelligence. But each planet has its own will. So what I mean by that is, when we realize that there's a mind at work, this mind is like a world over your world. So it's as if, like, every decision you have made in a physical reality has had to some degree an influence based on a subjective conceptualization of a self in a world. So in order to be individuals, this creature evolved and it separated itself from the world. It looked in the water and it was like, oh my God, that's me, that's the world, I'm not the world. So that was, in some sense, evolution was like the first great realization of the species, that we are separate and then we separately are evolving. You see? So what I'm trying to say here is that we separate just a certain amount of matter and particles that are moving based on a unique administration, as if they have gone to a certain stage of sophistication to be their own unit. So what I mean by this is that man's relationship began with separating itself from everything. Then this is where religion comes in, where religion is trying to unify things. This is why many religious principles consider a certain unity with the intelligence of the creator of the world. I was raised in Iran, until like 7, and then went back and forth and had glances of the culture. Uh, I moved to Canada. Right now I'm giving this talk from Toronto. But what I want to say is that my observations on a religious life. So let's say a religious lifetime. So imagine somebody accepts religious principles, and they're just going based on the simplicity and just the sincerity of the religious text. Violence is not sincere. This is the problem with extremism. It is insincere. It is as if it's and suppressed emotions must have external manifestation, but that is unnecessary, because God is not just an external intelligent thing. So if your intelligence anyways, what I don't want to talk about God right now, because it's nothing to talk about, actually, because you can't conceptually or philosophically or from any other angle, you cannot talk about everything as long as you're considering yourself as a tiny little thing, right? As long as the speaker feels like an ant, he cannot speak to the giants in the distance. It is only when the ant realizes it is not an ant, it is a giant, and in some sense taps into macrocosmic rhythmic intelligence. Lao Tzu and Confucius speak on that much more. But what I'm trying to get at is that there was an advancement towards a separation which allowed us to realize there could be a unity. But once we thought about the unity, we realized that, oh my God, not only are we people in the world, we are people with worlds behind our eyes in the world. And so this is where for me, language is a great war. In some other talks, I like did it justice and really spoke properly about it. But for me, there's a war of language and concepts going on. It's no longer survival of the fittest; it is the survival of the fittest idea, because the fittest idea holds the hammer of authority, and if the hammer of authority is challenged, well, it is the authority. It will hammer down. So this is the problem with society in terms that it is in some sense meant to be a guardian of the person in it, a cultivator, an advancer of the people in society, but it has a cruel side, and so it is the chaos and order of the mind's function and perceptions walk in some sense, whether it is turbulent or not turbulent. We look at the world through ourselves. And if our idea of self is fragmented, what that means is most people, their sense of self is fragmented because their sense of self is being based on different memories, which they compile based on their conscious reception of how far they can look into their memory. And in some sense, the better story you have of yourself to yourself, the better survival you have in some sense in this world. But if this story is more moving to the realms of the unknown, then the unknown will break knowledge. This is the secret of mysticism, that everything you think you know, you will reach a point where you will truly see the unknown. And once the unknown stares into your eyes, there is like literally to still remain in duality is like it is all just divine maneuverance, because there's no ego. So when the inner being has no intention to be molded based on images of the past or images of the future we consider imagination. Images of the past we consider memory. But all is occurring based on the present moment, where the flashlight has been turned on in the dark room of the cosmos. When our eyes open, so does the world open its eyes. And that is the profundity, because the world then pushes itself into a sense of being a witness of a subjective realm and an objective realm. And so religion is how a subjective reality is providing more solace for an emotional creature than an objective reality. But how is it providing that solace? Because it is saying that you who fear destruction, do not fear who has constructed all. This is a mentality in religious circles. That means I remember being in Iran, and people were just being themselves, having their normal personalities, doing different things. People are people everywhere. That's the biggest realization you understand, And so what I mean is, you don't judge a person by their ideas, because that's as if a person taking a picture of you on a bad day and saying that's you for the rest of your life. That is insanity. That it's not insanity; it's impatience, which it leads to chaos. You know, when chaos arises from impatience, that's when, in some sense, we have shot ourselves in the own foot. When we are not tolerant for ideas to at least to at least apply an effort to better change. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is that behind our eyes, the idea we have of ourselves brings along with it, poetically I'm saying this, brings along with it a universal axiom, not just one, but many, as if the person who reads the religious a religious book, if you're younger, you will declare those universal axioms as the most superior truth, and you will not change your view. You will walk without requiring any idea, because who can question God's words? You see? So I'm saying that religion, it provides for many people a sort of guidance and something to hold on to when things get rough in material reality. But the issue is that we are not being influenced by just material reality. We have developed societies that value communication, but they require their communication to be free. So the only way we can, so this is what Mr. Within is saying, that we must separate the world of speech with the world of experience, because speech cannot contain all experience. The religious live in the imagination of God, because once you wonder about where you are, for many people, or sorry, not about what you wonder about as an existential creature where you are, but when you wonder how your intelligence is present, you're at first given access to just what you think is normal. And then when you gaze further into the normal, as Alan Watts says, whatever you stare at eventually becomes stranger to you, because you're having more thoughts on it in some sense. You know? So the eyes that wonder of their source realize the source of their eyes. This is what Mr. Within is saying. The eyes that wonder about their source, they will in some sense become the source of their eyes. Meister Eckhart, this Christian mystic from thousands of years ago, one of those priests who sat on a table with a skull on the table, wondering and contemplating reality in more dimensions than just inner comfort, The problem with life is not freedom. People think freedom is the ultimate. Freedom is, it's there, it's up there, you definitely need freedom, but imagine you got the greatest freedom. The next thing you seek is direction. And direction comes from inspiration. So this is the issue, what I find with society, that many people, let us say religious or not, they try to climb the money ladder. And as they do, they have to adjust to society, and in doing so, they are choosing to live as an idea that is based on the environment rather than based on that which is within. And so what that means is they will become super rich and they will attain financial freedom. And in today's world, financial freedom means your mini garden of paradise, you know, right? So what I mean by that is they will go there, but they will see once they have been given freedom, what next? And they realize life is not about just freedom. It is about inspiration. It is about direction and inspiration. I remember reading the Quran when I was young, not all of it, but bits of it. And of course, I was reading the Arabic translation to Farsi, you know, and some people would explain different passages. And the word in Iran we use that's often used for God, even though it has Islamic principles, the country of Iran nowadays, it is one of those, how can I tell you? It's like the word for God is Khoda in Farsi. Khoda, uh, imagine that means God, and then the word Khod means self. So when I was young, people would say the word God like Khoda, and it's as if they're saying selfa, right? And I was like, So in the word God, there is the word self. And yet, we, in some sense, accept that we do not know what the Creator knows. Do you see? So it's as if, imagine the universal intelligence was like you look through yourself and you realize clarity. But everybody's trying to look at others to find clarity. Because what many religions do not share a lot on is what to do with imagination. They speak about design, they speak about conduct in the material universe, but they do not explain the depths of the mind. And in some sense, it was as if, in a religious perspective, there is a certain submissive grace. I don't know how to say this. There is a submissive grace once you wonder about super complex things because it is too unknown. So it's in the hands of God. And I'll give you an example of this. Like, um, imagine somebody who's living very peacefully and kindly and is trying to follow these religious values, and then you ask them like, why are why are you behaving in such a manner? And they say something like, I don't know if I will be here tomorrow or not. It's all in God's hands. Which means there is a truth beyond the idea of me. And in some sense, one can say religion was an effort to destroy all egos. But if the ego's last resort is to believe the story, belief is the last resort of the ego. It is the idea of you's last bunker before the ultimate truth arrives. And what I mean by this is that for me, life transformed from being a story. So automatically, everything I had read and been influenced by, every story I had heard, even bedtime stories, they became, in some sense, empty. And it was a chaotic emptiness where all the meaning of my past was dropped. And I try to gaze into my future, and it's as if the greater levels of my imagination were denied with me, so I could not even consider hope in the future. And so I was left in this present moment realizing I am the idea maker of every idea that has ever been accepted by my attention. Because on some level we're just a moment of being, and there is qualities to the moment. The quality to this present moment is your physicalness, your physical body, let us say. A quality of your moment of being, and we don't need to define it. I don't, even though I speak in language, I have to, but my point is, like, for how long, for how many eons do we want to dwell in the patterns of behaviors of our ancestors? There are some torches that must be passed on and carried, but there are some torches that must go out, and they will. Life is a self-administrating intelligence. When I say self, this is the cosmic self, as if everything in existence was one being, you know. Resembling that of an intelligent being, as if, like, the cells in your hand, one of the cells evolved and created language and began creating a podcast of this cell in your body. Is like, yo, we know nothing about the body aside from how the present moment is being unraveled, aside from how the movement and intention is. So eventually, one can say that the religious mentality brings you to an acknowledgement of the worldview as everything is in God's mind. And in some sense, human beings are the imagination of God. They spontaneously, after billions of years, evolve. It's as if, like, the universe gets a thought and the designs are already there, as if we are in the mind of a God beyond words and the reach of our knowledge. So, the supremacy of the unknown can bring enough fear in you to try to shape the unknown and behave based on its will. But there's also an opportunity given of the ego not having to identify with the story, which actually I call this the transparent idea of self, where you have a sense you're individual, but when you look at things, it's like all of existence is happening at once. Okay, so so what I'm trying to say is that heaven and hell could be easily interpreted as mental states if everything is a mental state. And so, if it is a mental state, if it is in a subjective realm, if it is in a different dimension, we cannot try to change things only by physical means. We can say we are a formless consciousness obsessed with form. And so we're so obsessed that we chose to, in some sense, pull it from the dirt. And after 4 billion years of evolution, still try to reach beyond the clouds. This is what I wonder. What if it's a formless intelligence playing with matter? And it is having so much fun with playing with matter that it has no sense of time and space as an ego. This is why people have to look at their watch. Because the ego is being reshaped in every moment, in every self aware transition. You know, Mahatma Gandhi has a very nice quote. Because even though I'm speaking now, and even though I acknowledge that a Western audience could be listening to this, and even though I know God gets a bad rep, in universities, but the idea of God is not shapeable. So, what is being rejected? You know, what is being rejected when even in the Quran it says, God has no partner. So as if there's nothing that can show you what God actually is aside from listening to wisdom of a source, of a unique path. To look at life and to appreciate its intelligent expression is a state of being attained only through natural means. You must naturally realize you are part of nature. And to realize it naturally means there needs to be no unnatural effort. There just needs to be the recognition that we are mortal forms within a formless intelligence that opens its eyes through many. I'm going to share two quotes, guys, and then I think I've spoken enough for this talk. There's a very nice quote by Khalil Gibran. He says, "I love you when you bow in your mosque, kneel in your temple, pray in your church. For you and I are sons of one religion, and it is the Spirit. It is intelligence, not intellect, intelligence. Intellect is unique. Intelligence, we see it everywhere. We see it as the sun rises. We see it as nature moves towards the sun's light." And I guess I'll end off with an Albert Einstein quote, because who can say anything wrong about Albert Einstein? You know, he's a remarkable explorer of man's mind in some sense. He says, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Ta-da! Drops the mic. If a religious person is living based on the principles of a certain outlook of the world, then religion seems to be an external reach for the internal. And the internal reaches for no longer the external, but for a sense of completion. We are creatures of completion. We seek it. We seek it in our work. We seek it on Fridays when we're about to get paid. We seek it when we're drinking a glass of water and want to drink it all. Your moment of being is the source of all meaning. Your attention is the God of your thoughts. There is one true God. And it is that which is unspeakably within all that is without, within all externality, moves a governing smile. I hope this talk has served you. Much blessings and namaste.